see how your pictures don't look fair to you. As you say, so we have different kinds of speakers. Normally people come like you are. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's just much greater. Being so
Good evening, everybody. If we want to start moving forward and picking a really good seat, because you'll want to be have a good line of sight to this screen, because this is going to be a great presentation. And I have a few announcements before we get started. Welcome to summer programming, by the way. First off, we are live streaming tonight, so everyone in the live audience should be aware of that. And when we do ask questions, we do want to use the microphone so that everybody watching from home has a chance to hear what the question was. So please wait for the microphone to arrive. Couple of announcements. As usual, we have a field trip coming up on March 21st to Funk's Grove. Is Jan Turner here? No. Oh, there, she's in the background waving her arm. If you want to attend that field trip, catch Jan at the end of the meeting in the red coat back there. Then after that, we have a couple of interesting events. We have our next meeting, April 13th, and that is by Alan Brandhagen, and it's on gardening for butterflies and moths. So a man after my own heart with that one. On April 18th, we will have our booth set up at the Earth Day Festival in Peoria. So those of you in the Peoria area, be sure to swing by that. And then I'm very excited, this is the first time this has been announced. April 23rd in Peoria, we have a showing of The Extraordinary Caterpillar. So much more information to come out on that one, but it is a film that's done in conjunction with the Caterpillar Lab and Homegrown National Park. It's amazing, simply amazing. So that will be in Peoria, and then we're looking for a location here in Bloomington so that we do a second screening somewhere in the Bloomington Normal area. So watch for information on that. And what everybody always looks for more than anything else is our plant sale, May 16th this year. So mark your calendars for that one in Carlock. Couple other announcements, not date related, but if you are interested in being on the pollinator pathway, I see Kathy Montgomery in the back row, we have signs available for that. So if you are a member and you join the pollinator pathway, you get a sign for free. If your sign broke, you lost your sign, and you're a member, they are $5, and for non-members, they are $10. And lastly, there's a sign-up sheet on the back table, or on the welcome table, for Team WILD. And WILD stands for Wild in Landscape Dreams, or something like that. And that's for people that might be interested in having a group of brainstormers visit their yard to think about, what could I do in this little troublesome spot here? What would look nice on the north side of my fence or on the east side of my house? So it's designed really to be an idea team. There's no landscapers on this team that are going to drop elaborate plans, but if you like brainstorming, please sign up in the back room. And if you have a trouble spot or you want some ideas or just to chit chat with people about native plants, sign up on the back sheet. For members, yes, this is for members. That is a member benefit for us to help each other out. That's really what it's all about. And honestly, one of the things that's the best about having meetings in person again is not, just looking at the slides and asking questions about orchids, although that is amazing. It's a chance to get to interact with each other again, because we're all coming out of winter hibernation. So we're now back with people who have the same interests that we do about native plants and habitats. So welcome. I'm glad that you did make the drive out here tonight. And with all that blah, blah behind me, I'm going to let Barry come up and introduce our speaker tonight.
Good evening. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Jan Gehring. She grew up on a farm in East-Central Nebraska, and she began her education in a one-room schoolhouse. Her and I have a connection there. I went to a one-room schoolhouse for my first 6 years of school as well. She received her bachelor's and master's degrees in biology from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Her master's research was on the impacts of red cedar spread on native prairie vegetation. She went on to earn her Ph.D. at the University of Colorado in 1990, where her research was on sexual dimorphism in white campion, which is Silene is it latifolia? Did I get that close? All right. Following that, she completed a postdoc at Indiana University from 1993 to 96. The majority of her career was spent in Peoria, where she served as assistant and associate professor of biology at Bradley University from 96 to 2020. At Bradley, she taught courses in evolution, ecology, and plant science. In retirement, Dr. Gehring loves traveling to natural areas where she can't help botanizing everywhere she goes. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Jan Gehring.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Ann. Thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks to the folks on Zoom for joining us as well. Just want to follow up on something that Ann spoke about. We had the Earth Day Festival is at Forest Park in Peoria, and I'm giving a wildflower walk. I'm doing a wildflower walk at, I think it's 1 o'clock. So if you got nothing better to do, come join us. All right, so I'm going to, this talk is sort of split into two sections. One is an introduction to orchids, and one is a summary of the orchids of Central Illinois. And I know the title said the orchids of Illinois, but I thought that might be overwhelming, and so I went with Central Illinois. So you'll see how I define Central Illinois in a few minutes. All right, now, the other thing I want to point out is that when you look back at that screen up there and you look at the screen here, you're going to see an incredible contrast in color. We have technical difficulties. Okay. Okay, so let's go, let's see, and that's over there. Okay, so we're talking about orchids, which is the second largest plant family in the world. Okay, only the Asteraceae have more species than the orchids. And these numbers, you're thinking, wow, a spread of 5,000? Well, actually, I've seen a number estimated to be 30,000. So guess what? We don't really know. Okay, that's the take home there. Why are there so many? And there are several reasons. Now I got to figure this out. Okay. Okay. First of all, you have a wide ecological range. Check this out. Orchids everywhere, except in the Arctic and the Antarctic. The rest of the world has orchids. Okay? So you take that and you combine that with habitat specialization, okay, and several other types of specialization, and you get endemism. That is, this species occurs here, not 100 miles down the road, but here, okay? Now, why are there are other reasons. One is the special symbiotic relationships with fungi. We don't, the level of knowledge of this is not, is starting to gain, but it's not where it could be, okay? And I don't even want to say should, because we just haven't had the technology to do this, to figure out whether a mycorrhizal fungus is one species or 5 species. We just don't have that ability, or not until recently. So what we do know is that orchids are dependent on mycorrhizal fungi. Are they dependent on one species or on a community of species? We don't know. Now, and the other possibility for all those species is specialized plant-pollinator relationship, and I'll be touching on that as we go through. Now, I feel like I'm shooting at Ann. Okay. Here is just one example of the plant pollinator specialized relationships. And this might be one that you've heard before. You may have gotten this story when you were taking general biology or evolution in college. And someone sent Darwin, Charles Darwin, this flower. And he looked at it and he realized that there was a 14-inch nectar spur. And he was flabbergasted. Okay? As much as a brilliant person can be flabbergasted, he was flabbergasted. All right? And he tried to speculate, well, how does this flower get pollinated? Because of course, if you look at a nectar spur, most of the nectar is at the base. And what it's trying to do is force the face of the pollinator into the reproductive structures, okay? And so that means somewhere, he speculated, there had to be a 14-inch insect with 14-inch proboscis. And he was right. So that's just one of literally thousands of examples of the special relationship between orchids and their pollinators, okay? I keep doing that. Okay, just ignore me. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the traits of orchids, and I'm going to start with the vegetative traits. And firstly, before I go any farther, I'm just going to say a lot of the traits of orchids are typical monocot traits, okay? For example, here we have alternate leaves, entire leaves with parallel venation. Well, that sounds like a monocot. Boring, we're good, let's go home. Sheathing bases, we're all familiar with that from grasses and some other species. Now, this is not very typical of most plants. I have one at home. The leaves are folded lengthwise. Don't tell anybody, but it's also dying, so yeah, it'll be our secret. A unique trait that, as far as I'm aware, is not found in other monocot or other species are pseudobulbs. And that's this structure right here. And it is for plants that are not growing in the ground, okay? And so this is a way to store carbohydrates and nutrients if you don't have underground structures. Now, most of our orchids, and perhaps all of them, are terrestrial. So they store their carbon underground. Okay. Now, we also see that the flower structure is the basic monocot scheme. Okay, we have 3 sepals. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. And we have 3 petals. 1, 2, 3. And if you look at each of these photos, you'll see that same pattern. So no big surprise. However, there is something unique about the orchids, and that is this petal right here. It's called the lip petal or labellum. And I'll come back to talk about that in more detail in just a second. In addition, almost all of these plants, all the orchid species, are bisexual. Again, this is not a surprise. 90% approximately of plants are bisexual, so no biggie. This is very unusual. Orchids, flowers, when they begin their development in their flower bud, this lip petal here or there, it is actually on top. It has a dorsal position, okay? But as the flower develops, the flower stalk twists the flower so that even though this lip petal starts at the top, in most orchids, it ends up on the bottom. Okay. Now, oh, it worked, even though I was looking in the wrong direction. Okay, yay. So, as I just pointed out, the sepals are very colorful. They're showy, that's the word that's often used, and they're similar to each other. They can either be distinct or fused. And so while we are used to looking at sepals and they are green, most orchids don't have green sepals. Okay? Now, in addition, we have 3 showy petals. There are usually 2 lateral petals that are alike, and again, very showy. But then there's the lip petal, which I already mentioned. That is a key trait of the Orchidaceae. There are really 2 traits that set the orchids apart from everything else, and that's one of them. It's usually very elaborate in either color or shape or decoration, and it is usually larger. And then it has all these other possibilities here, which I've got photos of. Okay, so, whoop. I do that, sorry. Okay, so this flower, you can see it's got spots on the limbellum, but it also has fringe, and this one is lobed, the trifecta. This one has bumps, but also fringe. This one, of course, is one of our lady slippers, and we see that pouch. This one is very hairy. And this is one of the ones I said, this is very unusual. The 2 lateral sepals are green and photosynthetic. Very atypical of an orchid. These 2 right here are the lateral petals, and so we have, this is the mid-lobe. This whole lip petal is lobed, okay? So we have 2 lobes here and 1 lobe there. And then the other lateral petals are up here. Now, just a little bit on orchid pollination as it relates to the limbellum, okay? Orchids are pollinated in a huge variety of animals, including birds and bats. But the role of the lip petal is crucial for pollination. And we can see that it can function as a landing pad, which is very important for organisms such as bumblebees that can't hover, so they need to land. We're very familiar with this. Our mints and our penstemons all have landing pads. I mean, composites are the perfect landing pad, right? Or Asteraceae, if you're more familiar with that term. Lip petals are often producing nectar, either in spurs or just in the flower. They guide their animal visitors, okay? It's kind of like there's the flower sitting there going, here, right here is how I'm gonna get pollinated. So you land here, okay, dude? And they do, because the orchid has been designed to make that successful. Attraction. This is a crucial part of any flower, except for wind pollinated things. And so we could talk about color, we can talk about shape, we can talk about the structures like those bumps and those hairs, we can talk about scent, we could talk about oils. What's fascinating is that some orchids mimic other flowers or insect mates or insect competitors, or nesting sites. And at this point, I had to really dial myself back because I would have been happy to talk about examples of these for the next hour, okay? So I'm going to give you a few examples. And then down here is trap pollination, and that's our lady slippers, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Okay, so this is an example of mimicry, okay? This species on the left is non-rewarding. That is, it doesn't produce nectar. Okay? And of course, you'll see in a second, it's not going to be, it's not producing pollen for being eaten. This is a member of its community, plant community, but it does produce nectar. So this orchid species is mimicking this species. So we're going to trick pollinators into coming here because they think they're going to get nectar. And when they did this research, they said that this orchid species had higher seed set when the model was present. So quite useful for the plant to have evolved these traits. Okay. Now, another example of mimicry is this orchid that mimics female wasps. And what makes it most effective is that the scent it produces mimics the female sex pheromones. So, come here, I love you. And the male tries to copulate the flower, okay? And this is all cheap because the orchid doesn't have to produce any nectar, no rewards, just the scent, okay? Now, one more example. This is not mimicry, but it is an example where the orchid produces something the insect wants and uses. And it takes this scent and marks their territory, the males mark their territories and use it in mating displays. Okay. So the general term for all of this is deceptive pollination. And it is, again, not super common in our flora, but family-wide, very common. However, I do have an example of one in our flora that I'll talk about later. Then there's the trap pollination. This is pretty much true of all of the lady slippers. I just put, because I like showing lady slippers, I put the picture there. Okay, so basically what happens here is that an insect enters the pouch and it can't get out. Why? Because the top of this is infolded and there are downward pointing hairs. So that then the insect is stuck. That's not what the plant wants. It doesn't want a dead insect in its pouch. What it wants to do is to find the two small openings at the back of the slipper that will force it to go brush against the reproductive structures and pollinate. Obviously, pollination is uncommon because you need a neophyte pollinator. I mean, I'm not saying it never happens otherwise, but you need somebody who hasn't been tricked before most of the time. Yeah. Okay. Now, so that's the perianth, the sepals and the petals. Now we're going to move on to the male parts, and the collective term for all the male parts is called andrecium. There are 1 to 2 stamens, rarely 3. In most orchids, they've lost that third one. Okay? And the pollen grains form a pollen mass that's called a pollinium, much like the milkweeds. Okay? And here are 2 drawings of this. And what we see here is that this drawing has 2 anthers, and each anther is forming this mass of pollen. Okay? This one has 1. So now you can see why pollen is not a reward in orchids. If the orchid doesn't supply nectar, there's nothing else there for the pollinator. So they fool them. Now, the other thing that we see here is that this stem right here is derived from the anthers so that it gets elevated a bit. And then there's a sticky pad which sticks the pollinia to the insect. Okay? And there's typically just 1 caudicle and 1 physidium, even if there are 2 pollinia. Okay. Now, gynecium. The collective term, this is the collective term for the egg-producing part of the flower. And we typically call the whole structure an ovary, but it's made up over evolutionary time of leaves. And the leaves have fused together at the margins. Now, I don't have 3 hands, but if I did, I would make it look like this, okay? So that this is a carpel, this is a carpel. Imagine a third hand, third carpel. And they're fused at the margins, so that means the eggs, the ovules, and eventually the seeds are in a central cavity, okay? So that's an orchid ovary. The other thing about orchid ovaries is that they are inferior, okay? And this is a term that means below, like Lake Superior is above. In this case, we have an inferior ovary. And you can see that means that it looks like the flower is coming off the top of the ovary. Okay, so so here's the ovary right here, and this is the flower coming off the top of the ovary. And here's an ovary right here, and it looks like the flower is coming off the top of the ovary. Okay, now, we have all these parts, male parts, female parts. They're all schmoodled together into a structure called the column. And this is the other key trait of the Orchidaceae. Okay. Now, the extent of the fusion depends on the evolutionary history of the clade. So basal clades are less fused, but we have very few. That's not really an issue for us. So what does this look like? Okay, so in this case, we have a very short column, pollinia up here, a flap here that keeps the pollinia separated from the stigma. Okay, now, ditto down here, there's a stigma, there's the sterile flap, and there is the anther cap that's covering up the pollinia. Okay? And a better photograph of this is right here. And we see this is before the pollen matures. This is the anther cap covering up the pollinia. And this is the sterile flap, and the stigmatic surface has no pollinia on it. It has not been pollinated. Here is later The anther cap, the pollinia are gone. The rostellum is still there, but the pollinia have been attached to the stigma. Okay. So this whole structure is the column. Very unique. Okay. Once fertilization occurs, I was just talking to somebody before the program about this, it's very, very, very difficult to germinate and grow orchids. Most orchids that you see like at the grocery store or whatever, are the result of cloning. Okay. And why is that? Well, the seeds are teeny, 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 tiny. People use this phrase, dust-like. Okay, imagine a pollen grain that is the size of a dust particle. And because they're so tiny, there is no endosperm, no stored resources. So if you're trying to germinate this dust-like pollen, how can you do that? Well, you have to provide them with correct mycorrhizal fungi. And if you figure that out for one of our native species, let me know. Okay? Love to hear it. Now, switching gears. Like I told you, I said I thought, well, maybe I should focus on the native orchids of central Illinois rather than the entire state. And so that's what I decided to do. Now, it turns out that Illinois has 49 species, native orchid species in the entire state, and here in central Illinois we have 32. So we have 2/3, give or take. Now, 16 of the 49 are state endangered, 7 of the 32 are state endangered. Well, you know why. You've heard this story before. Habitat destruction and overcollection, poaching, invasive species, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Nothing new there. We also have, here in central Illinois, one species that is presumed extirpated, and that's on the list, the handout that I gave you, prepared for you. And so you'll know which one that is on there as well. Okay, so I lived in Peoria for 30 years. And I never had the occasion to figure out what central Illinois is. Okay, what are the boundaries of central Illinois? I must have used that phrase 5 million times in my classes. Especially, I taught a course called Flowering, Reproduction and Identification of Flowering Plants. I swear, I use that phrase every single class. What is central Illinois? Well, here's Wikipedia's answer. And I went with it. Anybody see anything here that you want to fervently disagree with? I think, do you agree that this is probably a reasonable depiction of central Illinois? Yes. Quincy is on the Mississippi, so that's over there. This is the Illinois River, excuse me, no, this is the Illinois River. That's I-55. Beg your pardon?
The South Road would be the northern cutoff. In my opinion,
So I'm not,
The South Peru would be the cutoff, in my opinion,
oh, okay.
along with the Illinois River.
Oh, so you wouldn't go further west than the Illinois River? Okay. Anyway, the point being is, this is the map I went with. This is the definition I went with. So, you know, take that in the context of the rest of what you hear. Okay. And then I matched that map with the distribution maps of BONAP and the Illinois Natural History Survey. Okay. Before I dug into more detail, I thought it'd be interesting to see, now that I've identified the orchids that grow in central Illinois, what is their placement on orchid phylogeny, or the orchid evolutionary tree, okay? There are 5 subfamilies of orchids. One is at, and we have 3 of them. We have plants in 3 of those subfamilies. Down here at the bottom, our lady slippers orchids are in Cypripedioideae, which is down at the base of the tree. That means it's evolutionarily older, the subfamily. Now, are these species evolutionarily older? That's an unknown, okay? Then the 2 largest subfamilies are the Epidendroideae and the Orchidoideae. And we have species in both of those. The Orchidoideae subfamily, we have 22 species here in central Illinois, and they're all spiranthes and plantantheras. So a lot of our orchid species are in those 2 genera. And then in the Epidendroideae, we have 8 species in 6 genera. Okay. And just to briefly introduce you to Plantanthera and Spiranthes, this is the most common genera, Plantanthera, and Plantanthera is found only in the temperate zone of the northern hemisphere. Okay, so the fact that we have them is not a surprise. And you can see that one of their characteristics is a lobed labellum. In this case, we have 4 lobes. In this case, we have very thin lobes, and there's a lot of them. Okay, so this gets called green fringed orchid. And this one, despite the little fringes at the tips, is called purple fringeless orchid. I just typed them in. Now I'm not responsible for this. Okay. And the Plantanthera is found in a lot of wetlands. A lot of them are. And by the way, take a look at the gorgeous color of this Plantanthera on the back screen, if you can. All right, so now our other most common genera is Spiranthes. Spiranthes are, so the genus name is derived from the fact that the flowers are produced in spirals. Spiral or spirals. And they come both ways, okay? The other interesting thing about, oh well, and I forgot to mention They are temperate zone species again, but in this case, they are found both in the temperate zone of the northern hemisphere and the temperate zone of the southern hemisphere. So there are spiranthes in Australia. Now, the other cool thing about spiranthes is that you see that these are little tubular flowers. They're less than 1/2 inch, but they're little tubes. How do they get tubes? And the answer is that some part of the sepals and some part of the petals fuse together to make a tube. Now I have it all in my notes, which species has 2 petals versus which species has 3 petals, which species has 2 petals and 1 sepal, which species has 2 sepals and 1 petal. If you're interested, you can talk to me after. Okay. Now, I said I determined which species were in central Illinois, according to the distribution maps. So, this is one of the distribution maps for Galliaris spectabilis, showy orchid. And you can see that showy orchid is quite common in central Illinois, and in fact, statewide. And you can also see that these light grays are medium confidence. Somebody somewhere said, yes, I saw these. And then we have medium high confidence, which is these dark grays. And again, often observations by expert botanists. I'll leave you to determine how comfortable you are with experts, okay? Because experts make mistakes too. But the dark black ones are vouchered herbarium records. And so that means they're in, the Illinois Natural History Herbarium or the University Herbarium or some herbarium somewhere. But what we can take, and there's been a lot of these collected in the 2000s, the 2010s, and even some in the 2020s, which makes me cringe, to be honest. I hope people stop feeling the need to do this. But that said, what we can conclude from this is that, yes, those distribution maps are telling us that this orchid is here in central Illinois. Okay? And by the way, this is Peoria County right here, and I've seen showy orchid in Peoria County, so yeah. I don't know that I would call myself an expert, but I surely didn't collect a herbarium sheet. And I stand by that decision. Okay, now, in contrast, we have Spiranthes lucida, the yellow-lipped lady's tresses. You can see that there are only 2 counties where it was identified, and it hasn't been collected in over 100 years. And the only known population, according to the Natural History Survey, is in Cook County. So while this species is on the list I gave you, I am not confident that it's still here in central Illinois. Okay. So that list is what used to be, not what is. Okay. Take home. Just because a species was reported from central Illinois sometime in the past doesn't mean the species is extant now. We've had a tremendous amount of habitat destruction. That habitat destruction continues. And so we'll leave it at that. Okay, the other way I thought about talking about the orchids of central Illinois was to categorize them according to habitat. The first three I'm very comfortable with. There's wet habitats, there's forests, and there's open habitats, think prairie. Now, I had 4 species that just would not behave. So I put them in a type called multiple habitat types. Now, there's a couple of possibilities here. One is I looked at several references for each species, but if they haven't been observed very often, it might be that one observation is overwhelming the basic underlying habitat, okay? If we have 5 observations of wetlands and 1 or 10 and 1 in a forest, well, probably it's a wetland species. But that's not what shows up in the descriptions of habitat on things like Illinois wildflowers, okay? And I also looked at Molenbrock and other sites as well. Another possibility is just flat out misidentification. This happens. And the other idea is that I didn't look enough. Okay, so, okay. We have 14 species in wet habitats. And wet prairies, low woods, stream banks, bogs, fens, marshes, swamps, okay? 14 species, 4 that are state endangered. And these species are indicators of high quality wetlands, which is amazing that we have any left. Forest habitats, there are 8 species. There are 8 species in open habitats, and 4 species in my pseudo category here. Okay, so let's take a look at, let me catch up here. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the species in the wet habitats. We'll start with Cypripedium candidum, the small white lady slipper. This one has a pouch that's a little shorter than the pouch of the showy lady slipper that I showed you earlier, the pink one, okay? And that's why they call it the small white lady slipper, okay? It has very, I don't think you can see this very well, it has the structure of other lady slippers. So there's a dorsal sepal up here. This down here is 2 sepals fused together. Okay, so that's our 3 sepals. And then this is, of course, the labellum, or the lip petal. And then these are these twisted things are the lateral petals. Okay. These orchids are also found in wet habitats. The brass pink orchid is just fascinating. And I'm going to flip to my notes so I don't forget anything, because there are several points here. First of all, the genus name means beautiful beard in Greek. Okay, Calopogon. Another fascinating thing about this orchid is that, in contrast to most orchids, the lip petal is erect. In other words, this species does not do the twisting during development. Then, thirdly, again, you would have to look at the photo on the projector in the back. This color of this species is mimicking marsh phlox. Okay, so this is a species that does not produce nectar and is practicing deceptive pollination. Haha, got you fooled. Okay. Then this is another Plantanthera species, and again, it's got the highly dissected lip petal, which is called fringed. All right, now, a couple more species in wet habitats, and this is Liparis locelii, and and it has those very striking basal but erect leaves. Okay. Then over here we have, we have the tubercled orchid. That's its common name. And I had to learn this last week. What's a tubercle? Okay, well, it turns out it's these little bumps. So that's why this gets called tubercle orchid. Okay, now, switching over to forests. This is putty root orchid, and what's interesting about putty root orchid is that this single basal leaf is present in the winter. And in fact, anybody here on the Illinois Botany Facebook group, Keith Horn just posted a picture of one of these leaves last week sometime. So, but then the resources that are in the leaf are pulled back underground, and then the plant flowers. So when it's flowering, this leaf is not present. So it's there in the winter, either through most of spring or all of spring, but then when the plant flowers, it's gone. Here's a couple of more species that are found in forests. This particular one, again, there's fusion of sepals and petals to form these hoods. Okay. And then there's a rectangular lip petal. Unfortunately, this isn't going to show up. These flowers on the rattlesnake plantain are really hairy, like fuzzy hairy. Yeah, if you can turn around and squint at the screen in the back, you probably could see them better. The other thing about these flowers is that the lip petal forms a sac. And then surrounding the sac are the sepals. Okay. And then the last species in forests that I'm going to highlight is the three birds orchid. This used to be called nodding begonia, but the problem with that is it's not classified as a begonia anymore. So it's best to not use that common name. You will engender much confusion. This plant has flowers that last for only a couple of hours. And then only for a couple of days, which makes the plant ecologist in me like go absolutely nuts. Like, okay, I gotta do research, I gotta find these, and I gotta do a research project because I gotta see how much seed set there is. I bet how many of these flowers don't ever set seeds? No. Anyway. And let's see what else can I say about these guys? Yes, that's it. Oh, they synchronize blooming across the region. So if you're trying to do research on it, you have to be in 10 places at once. Good luck with that. Well, you know, if you're at the U of I, then you have a whole bunch of grad students. Awesome for you. That was not my case. So, moving on to open habitats. Again, you can think of, this is prairies. It doesn't show up very well on this screen, but this is the purple tway blade orchid. And the reason it's called purple is because the flower stalk is purple. And then these structures are also purple. What is this? Anybody have a guess? I beg your pardon? Lateral petals. Isn't that amazing? It's just these little thread-like things. Lateral petals. And of course, this is the lip petal. Okay. And this is one of the sepals, and this is another sepal, and this is another sepal. Okay. And then again, most of our Spiranthe species are in open habitats like prairies. Okay. And so you see this, this Spiranthes there as well. Again, tubes formed through fusion. Okay. And a couple more Spiranthes, also same story. These also, the leaves wilt away before flowering begins. Okay. So again, leaf photosynthesizing, leaf putting lots of resources underground, and then gone. Okay. And then there's one more, also very typical of our prairies. In fact, Anne just mentioned she has a Spiranthes in her yard, which I'm really, really, really jealous of. The only thing that's in my yard is what I planted. Okay. Now, what about the species that are found in a variety of habitats? Well, I identified two. I'm showing you two. Again, Plantathera leucophea. Plantathera leucophea is found, again, I don't have the explanation for this. It's found in prairies and wetlands. I can speculate that somebody back in 1890 was riding their horse through a prairie along the Illinois River, and they called it a prairie instead of a wetland. I don't know. And then Cypripedium parviflorum, or some people call it Callioscosis, and some people call it Cypripedium pubescens. You're better off just calling it large yellow lady slippers for now. Taxonomy is in flux. But in any case, this species is supposedly found in forests and wetlands, which makes my head hurt. And I don't know, again, my guess is that perhaps it was just misdescribed, but I don't know. I will say, just go back to here. See that? This is a nectar spur. So, okay, I'm going to finish up now with just a brief description of a thing that was sitting on the shelves in biology department at Bradley. This is a booklet that was written and published by Dr. Frederick Brendel in 1987. He was a physician. A little closer to the mic. Oh, sure. Thank you. Sorry, I keep heading that way. This was a book that was published by Dr. Frederick Brendel. He called it Flora Peoriana. He was a physician, and I clearly wasn't that busy, because this represents probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours of work. A lot of it is a description of the climate of the Peoria area. And then there's lists of the species that he plant species that he identified. And I mean, I just pulled out the stuff for the orchids, but he covered a lot of all the rest of the flora as well. The taxonomy is tricky because lots of names have changed to protect the innocent, I guess. But nevertheless, this is an amazing resource, which I'm not going to let you look at because this book is falling apart, okay? And he listed these species. And if we go back, you can say that 8 of those species, again, within a 10 to 12 mile radius of Peoria, 8 of those species were wetland species. That makes a lot of sense, okay? We have the Illinois River. We have bogs and fens on the East Peoria side. If you've ever driven from Peoria into East Peoria, you know you come up on these big bluffs. Those bluffs are moraines. And there is one bog that's remaining, and the reason the fens developed there is because the water drains through the moraine, and it then hits an impermeable layer and drains into puddles. Okay, and that's one of the few places in the Peoria area where you can find skunk cabbage. And it's all, or like 99% of it is gone. So Dr. Brendel is an incredibly important source for the Peoria area. Like I said, I'm not going to read these or anything, but that's what he found. Oh, what's interesting here is that he doesn't list any prairie species. And if you go, even now, if you go out, 10 miles, Well, you'll find cornfields, right? But that used to be prairie. Maybe it was already cornfields at the time he was exploring? Could be. Because of course they were very interested in, you know, that Peoria is one of its nicknames. I'll hesitate to mention any others, but it's Whiskey City, right? And that's because we had fresh spring water, which is gone, but also, or mostly gone, but also we had lots of trees to burn, to make the whiskey, to make the barrels for the whiskey. And then we had lots of corn to actually put into the whiskey. So it could be that that's why he didn't identify them as prairie species. He found them in oak savannas and stuff like that. Could be. All right. And thank you very much for your attention. Questions? Yes, sir. Oh, of course.
When is the best time of year, to go looking for these?
Whoa. Well, that depends on the species, sir. Okay, so my recommendation is to, if you're interested in a particular species. Okay. All right. It depends on the species, right? So some species bloom early in the spring, some bloom in September. And so if you're interested in a particular species, I would do a quick Google search or look at Mallenbrock or the Plants of Chicago and see what they say about that. Illinois Wildflowers is another site. Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Illinois History, Natural History Survey.
We have Sporanthes cernua on our property, and when I find one, I'll mark it with a flag so I can find it again next year. They never come back. Where are they going? They'll pop up somewhere else.
Okay, so the first answer to your question is I don't know. Okay, second answer is hypotheses. Okay. Potentially, they have rhizomes, and this year the rhizome produces a plant over there, and next year it's going to be 5-10 feet away. Maybe. Hypothesis. I suppose hypothesis 2 is that there was a seed bank and the conditions were right for it to show up somewhere else. I'm not that enthusiastic about that hypothesis, but it's a hypothesis. Do you have any hypotheses? Didn't like. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you could run an experiment if you ever have two at once. Put a flag by one and don't put a flag by the other and see what happens. Yes, sir, Barry.
Dan, of the 32 you have listed there, how many have you actually witnessed?
In Peoria County, 2. Okay. Which isn't all that encouraging.
Which two?
Aspiranthes and the showy orchid, Galerius. And I saw Spiranthes at Robinson Park. I have not been back there in years, so I don't know if it's still there. You would have to be, you have to go off trail, and so I would encourage you not to do that.
Can I ask a question? How competitive are they? Will they get crowded out by other plants easily, or will they stand their ground?
Some of them are going to want open habitat, right? So that if it gets too shaded, they will die back. And of course, if the hydrology is messed up in a wetland species, adios. And so, so much of this is unfortunately due to our actions that I don't have a more plant ecology answer to that question. I don't know that they are that they get out competed for nutrients. I've never read anything about that, but I suppose it's possible. I think light is a bigger factor, which is typical. I mean, I studied birdsfoot violet, and it really liked, you know, the reason burning was so important was because it opened up the habitat and brought more light in, not because it couldn't compete for nutrients. Yes?
Can you elaborate more about rhizomes?
So rhizomes are, let me know if I hit where you want me to go. Rhizomes are underground stems.
I'm trying to get rid of that. But you answered Sherry's question mentioning talked earlier about it's hard to grow orchids from seed. I'm probably not as knowledgeable about, but I always thought a rhizome, if you didn't get rid of it,
If the other conditions are correct in the environment, then yes. But again, if you've messed with the hydrology or you've messed with the fire regime, then no. I wouldn't go that far because many plants will, you know, if that's a wetland plant and you mess with the hydrology, which we have done big time, it doesn't matter whether it's an orchid or that marsh phlox, they're still going to be in trouble. I mean, also, there's the factor of the mycorrhizae. Okay. So if the hydrology isn't what it should be, that's going to impact the mycorrhizal fungi. Or if there's a lot of invasive species, you know, you've all heard the story about garlic mustard messing with the mycorrhizae. So there's a multitude of factors, right? And that's, I mean, your hypothesis is a starting point, but it's a lot more complicated.
In what kind of protection are the remaining orchids in central Illinois getting? Are some of them in preserves?
I would imagine so, but I do not know that specifically. I hope so. How about that? One of the things we can sort of, if I flip that around, I say, where do you find oak savannas in central Illinois? Well, that would be where there are preserves. So if you're looking for it, if you hope to find an orchid in an oak savanna, well, you're going to go to a preserve because there aren't any, the rest of them have been, cut down. Or a lot of them have. I mean, we do have a lot of forests on the bluffs, on the Peoria side and along the Illinois River, and some of that is still in private hands, but a lot of it is in, yeah, or it's being subdivided. Ugh. I always feel like a hypocrite when I say that because I would love to live on the bluff. Yeah. Go ahead, Ann.
If we find an orchid out in the wild, should we report it to anybody?
Oh, especially if it's an endangered species, one of the endangered species, absolutely. But I don't, I would take a photo and send it to the Illinois Natural History Survey and see what they say. Or the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. I mean, the best of all possible worlds, you find a site that has high biodiversity, which the orchid species would be an indicator. So if you've identified a area with high biodiversity, then that should be considered for preservation.
So there's a putty root in a certain place that I go see, and 2 years ago, we saw it bloom. And then we always see the leaf in the fall, winter. But then last year, we only saw one, where I would see a lot of leaves that spring, but then it was May and we didn't see. So, no, got any hypothesis about why that happens?
We are in hypothesis number one, which pops immediately into my mind. We are in an era of climate change, and that may be impacting the cues that it uses to bolt, that is, to set up the flowering stem. Unfortunately, my second hypothesis is even worse, otherwise known as white-tailed deer. I'm trying to think. Rabbits. I don't know about you guys, but I have a horrible rabbit problem in my yard. And I'm in the city. I can't imagine what it's like out in the country. Do you have any ideas? Yeah. It might be just the environmental cues are not correct.
Like it's not getting the pollinator at the right time?
Oh, well, that would not impact its ability to flower, right? That's later. But say, for example, the area is getting more shaded, okay, over time, because it hasn't been burned in a long time, and most of our, if not all of our habitats were burned regularly. So maybe not enough light. Again, garlic mustard, maybe messing with the mycorrhizae. And so then there aren't enough resources to bolt. I'm speculating, for sure. But when it comes down to it, plants need water, nutrients, and light. So I would start by thinking in those categories.
Any other questions?
I think I should apologize for this microphone thing, but I wasn't always talking into it, so I apologize if you couldn't hear well. All right, well, I'm glad to hear that, because I didn't
I didn't notice it lessening any when you turned.
yeah.